to go ahead and get everyone checked in. Looks like we have Mr. Zobrist. Mr. Zobrist, welcome.
Hello.
And you are the applicant on the project, correct?
Yeah,
That's correct. Yes.
My wife is here because I had oral surgery this morning. So
Okay.
I didn't want you to think I was drunk and slurring my words. So there's two of us.
Sure, no problem. Give me one second. I have Mr. Zobrist, the Zobrist Design Group, as the applicant on the project, and I'm assuming Mr. Schimberg, you're the owner.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. Welcome. And is your wife going to be providing testimony as well?
Yeah.
Okay. What is her
Jayna, Jayna.
Got it. Is it also Schimberg?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Welcome.
Thank you.
We'll get started here in just a minute. Looks like we have a Chris Davis. Is there a Chris Davis with us? If so, if you could unmute.
That's me. Hello.
Hi. Mr. Davis, could you tell me who you're representing here today?
I'm representing myself. I live at 1882 William Howard Taft Road, directly across the street.
Okay, great. Welcome.
Dan,
Mr. Davis.
Dan and Jana, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
We've
you.
not had a conversation yet.
Great. Mr. Davis, do you intend on potentially providing any testimony here today?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. I'll ask at the time that you do want to offer testimony that at that time your camera is working.
It should be now, is it?
No, we can't see you. I'm gonna try and
there it
prompt
is.
you.
Hold on. Let's
Okay.
see. Yes, start video. There you
Fantastic.
go. How's that?
All right, that's better. Hi,
you
welcome.
Hello.
All right, we'll get started here in just a minute.
Great.
Ms. Grant, Valerie Grant, are you present?
Hi, I'm
Hi there. Are you an adjacent property owner as well, or who are you representing here today?
I'm representing myself. I am a neighbor at 423 Heather Hill Lane.
Okay.
I have a letter, so apologies. We just received the notice of the hearing on Monday at 4 p.m. So I am more interested in listening, but I do have a letter that I wanted to submit, and I have it drafted up. Was going to submit it this morning, but I just wanted to ask, is it best for me to present or just to send you the letter?
So that's up to you.
Okay.
I think if you have a letter that's written out and it's ready to go, my identification line on my square there is my email address.
Yep.
If you could send it to that, I'll add your letter to the official case record.
Thank you.
And then if you would like to summarize the letter or read the letter or provide any other testimony, you can also have that opportunity, but it will become official part of the record. And I think it would be helpful since you're here, if you have time to just provide that.
Thank you.
That oral testimony. You're welcome. Okay. Let's see. On the applicant owner side, are we expecting anyone else to join us here today?
No, we had Jonathan Edwards had been on there, but he's not going to attend.
Okay, great. We also have Wes Menzel, who's the zoning plans examiner. He is also joining us and provided a staff report and a recommendation on this project. Welcome, Wes. All right, last thing I need to do is just read through our hearing script. This basically will just cover the procedure of the hearing, and then we will jump right into it. So this is the March 22nd, 2023 session of the zoning hearing examiner docket. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the zoning hearing examiner for the city of Cincinnati, and I'll preside over this hearing. The case before us today is case number ZH20230019. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. Members of the public will then have an opportunity to speak after the applicant has presented its case. I will give the zoning plans examiner an opportunity to provide the testimony in addition to his staff report. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to an application, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut that testimony and or argument that was offered in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make any closing statements. So for our purposes here today, I will allow so Mr. Zobrist and the Schimbergs to tell me about the project, any background they think is important, and then of course why they think I should grant the requested relief. You all can orient that presentation however you'd like. One or all of you can speak in any order you'd like. It's really totally up to you, however you think is best for me to fully understand this project and the reasons why this relief should be granted. I'll then go and allow Mr. Davis and Ms. Grant an opportunity to provide any testimony that they would like. I think we have one more person joining us who's another neighbor who submitted letters late this morning for this case. So I'm letting him in now. I'll give each of them an opportunity to provide any testimony that they would like. I'll then go to Mr. Munzel. Mr. Munzel can provide any testimony in addition to a staff report. And then I'll go back to the applicant and the owners, and you can respond to anything that the public has said, and ultimately make any closing remarks. I'll have some questions along the way, but after all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing, and then decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. Important point for the members of the public that are here, the neighbors. Sometimes I'll allow a little leeway on this, but really all that the procedure calls for is for you all to have sort of one bite at the apple, giving your statements. And so I would encourage you to be thorough. If you have questions, that's fine, but I would encourage you to be thorough on your original statements. All right, I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or to make any comments. I may also refuse to consider hearsay testimony or documents. That's generally evidence you want to introduce that consists of statements made by someone who's not present at this hearing today. That is discretionary. In the event of any technical difficulties or problems with the Zoom technology, I'll do my best to troubleshoot those on the fly, but to the extent there's some defect that prevents us from me fully going forward with the hearing, I may continue or postpone the hearing at my discretion. Okay, last thing I need to do here is just swear in all of our witnesses. If you intend on providing any testimony here today, making any comments, asking any questions, doing anything doing anything other than just strictly observing. Looks like everyone's got their hand up, so we're ready to go. I will swear you in now. I need everyone to, if you could unmute yourself, just because I need everyone to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
I do.
Great. Thanks, everyone. All right. Mr. Zobrist, Schimbergs, who's going to be taking the lead here on the presentation?
Dan, I can if you'd like,
Why
or
don't
you can.
start? That's fine.
Okay.
You start.
So to give a little bit of background on the project, currently the house has been constructed on this parcel. It was 2 parcels originally, and the house has been under construction for a couple, just about 2 years now, as far as going through this process. We had designed an entry for the house off of William Howard Taft, and after witnessing kind of the process of the project and the amount of traffic and so forth that we've been seeing on William Howard Taft, we've generated an entry sequence that should hopefully alleviate people entering and leaving the 1875 William Howard Taft with an option for a turnaround and so forth. Upon doing that, we also were trying to address the pets and so forth that live on the property, such as dogs and so forth, and trying to keep them contained within the property. With doing that, we looked at the fence sizing and so forth around the entire property, including the front elevation, and determined that the 6 foot is really kind of the ideal to deal with potential coyotes and so forth that live on the hillside and so forth in the area of William Howard Taft. So between the 6 foot high fence variance that we're requesting on the front, along with the required entry sequence with the gating appropriate for that, and then also the turnaround, all 3 of those items are part of our application for variance. To break those 3 down, the entry monument or stone entry gate was really designed in necessity to help conceal a lot of the operating mechanism of the movable gate and so forth that is going to complete the full enclosure of the yard. So we designed that to about 4 foot high on either side to conceal that equipment, and then added a couple of decorative stone columns to give it some type of presence as you enter through the entry. Along with that, we did look at kind of the zoning requirements for a solid entry feature. We are allowed 100 square feet for a entry feature. When you do break down, even though the size is longer than 10 feet, when you do break down the square footage of it, it does meet the square footage requirement, but not necessarily the length requirement. So just depends on how you want to interpret that. As we step out from that, we have a fencing system that will continue on from the stone entry that will run along William Howard Taft. As mentioned earlier, that is going to be 6 foot high. The transparency on that is exceeding 70%. The spacing is hitting code minimum of the 4 inches between each spindle spacing to try and keep that as transparent as possible. But more so from a standpoint of keeping pets in and other animals out of coming into the property. The third component is the turnaround aspect. With the entry gate component, if somebody was to arrive at the property and the homeowner was not home, or somebody was to open the entry gate, they would need to back out onto William Howard Taft. We felt that was very unsafe after kind of witnessing the traffic over the last year and a half or so building the house. So we designed a option for somebody to be able to back up and turn around and go out onto William Howard Taft appropriately frontwards. The design we have for the turnaround at the bottom, it's classified as parking technically according to the zoning regulation. The main driveway component of this will be concrete, which is the 13-foot wide component that comes in straight off of William Howard Taft and through the gate. The turnaround area is actually going to be, instead of a solid concrete, it's going to be a mixture of stones, dry laid, and so forth, similar to some other stuff we've done on the property that has a little bit more landscape appeal to it instead of a hard surface driveway to try and blend that more with the landscaping at the entry feature. So those are kind of the 3 elements that we have presented and the reasons why we believe that they should be approved. In conjunction with the fence height, the adjacent neighbors to the right and to the left both have non-conforming fences as well. The one to the right has 0 transparency. It's a solid fence, and the one to the left is more of a 70% transparency as well. So we believe we are definitely within kind of what the neighborhood vernacular is for that side of the street and so forth on the fencing side of things.
Okay.
And do you have anything to add to the?
Just a couple. The fencing spacing where it goes east and west from the bottom of the driveway paralleling William Howard Taft. We've quite a wide entrance there where it comes down from the yard and turns to the east and to the west to provide an enormous amount of kind of life safety visibility. And so when someone is exiting our yard, the driveway is 13 feet. And I think the fencing that runs along William Howard Taft to the right and left, I think we've added another 15 feet aside, something like that, Kurt?
Yeah, close to 20 on either side.
So we have about a 35-foot clear visibility with people leaving the yard. So to make sure that we are very sensitive to the cars coming up and down William Howard Taft, pedestrians, we essentially took our driveway and added a lot of square footage so that there'd be ample visibility. I think furthermore, as you continue down William Howard Taft towards Columbia Parkway, the last 2 houses have substantial retaining walls in excess of 6 feet. Some of them are, 8, 10, 12, 15 feet, right up against the sidewalk that continues up. So there is a lot of continuity of tall structure on the south side of William Howard Taft from Columbia Parkway up to Taft Lane. And so we are merely mimicking a lot of what's going on there, just with some current architecture. So that is the piece. There was an issue with concern, I think Wes Monzel had brought it up early on, that one of the issues is there's no parking in the front yard. And by creating a lot of stone area, it could be misconstrued as not a parking turnaround, but a parking pad. We are happy to post absolutely no parking on those spaces to ensure that no one is mistaking that or seeing that as an opportunity to park.
Gotcha. And those spaces would be, or that area would be outside of the gate, correct?
Yes. So the idea is an Amazon truck pulls up, leaves a package. He has to back out, and it's much safer and easier for him to turn it over onto this kind of a rock patio space and loop around and pull out onto William Howard Taft facing front. It just felt much more palatable and safer.
Gotcha. Okay. Anything else right now from Mr. Zobrist or the Schimbergs? Okay. I'm going to hold off on some of my questions until I give other folks an opportunity to weigh in here. Wes, I was hoping to go a little bit out of order here, and just if I could ask you to clarify exactly what the zoning relief is that the zoning department has determined is necessary here, and why from the zoning department perspective.
Okay, the gateway and fence feature as submitted, I mean, even though Kurt mentioned there's a 1421-33 Part C outlines that a gateway structure is allowed that's up to 10 feet wide or 10 feet tall. As he alluded to, there's a little bit of an interpretation situation there. So we just interpreted the entire thing as a fence, basically all the way across. And maybe it could be considered a gateway, but then even if it is a gateway, it's too wide. It's more than 10 feet wide. The stonework and the column height would conform to the 10 feet height limit. But nevertheless, we took it as a fence, so that the fence variance would be for the height. The 6 foot height is 2 feet more than the 4 foot limit for front yards, and then the stonework area would need an opacity variance based on our interpretation as a fence. So we're in support of those requests based on our interpretation. And then
Wes, do you have the calculations for how wide the stone? What is the width of the stone structure?
It looks like there's 2 segments that are
10 foot 8 each.
Yeah, 10 foot 8 each,
Okay.
Including the column and the 4 foot section in the middle. So 2 10 foot something segments that are 4 to 6 feet tall.
Got it.
Then the other part of our zoning relief analysis was the front yard parking part. As far as those 2 segments of stonework or on each side of the driveway.
So this is the turnaround area that the applicant and owner were alluding to, that will have the stonework instead of the rest of the driveway pavement.
Right, the driveway,
Yes.
as Kurt mentioned, is 12 or 13 feet wide. That's going to be concrete, and that's perfectly fine width and everything. And then if you look at the drawing they submitted, shows the design with the extra, I think it's about 15 feet or something by 15 in that range, size on each side. So we've been pretty stringent on our front yard parking stuff. So that's why we landed on that, being a relief item. So that's 3 items that, as Kurt mentioned earlier.
Okay.
And Wes, to
Thanks for
clarify,
clarifying.
you're allowed a 20-foot wide driveway, correct? Per code?
Yes, ideally it goes to a 20-foot wide garage, but
Okay.
I think there's a little variation in how some people do it in their office. So I mean, yeah, you could conceivably do a 20-foot wide driveway at the curb, and maybe it narrows in as you go in a little bit to 1 lane wide or whatever, whatever is appropriate. Just as an aside, like a lot of times you'll have a house that has a driveway that goes down to a basement garage. There's retaining walls on each side, and then we have to, since the driveway, people want to expand that distance, add a new retaining wall and make it wider, we have to kind of be more stringent in certain cases because they're going to go beyond the width of their garage, and substantially. So that's not your case here, but I'm just saying that's one area where we have a little bit of interpretation of the width. So I can highlight a couple more comments later, David, if you would like.
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to provide just a clear framework for how you've interpreted this and what I'm being asked to approve as we work through some of the public comments. So I appreciate that, Wes. And I think now we'll move on to the public comments. So I'll start again, just based on the orientation of my screen. I'll go to Mr. Davis here. Mr. Davis, is there anything you want to say on this?
Yes, I would appreciate any other city comments that were available if they were available for me to address as well. But I can start with what I've got right now. It's clear that the design of the fencing, this is a 1,700 square foot setback that is really makes no sense as anything but parking. This is front yard parking with a significant fence setback out and around it. I understand that what they've illustrated in this design is what they're calling turnarounds, but the city correctly identified that as parking area. It's nothing but that. There is abundant parking directly on Taft Road itself, which has been used during the construction of this house for the last 2 years. And it's easy to use. I do not see an Amazon delivery vehicle using their turnaround in ways that will make it useful for them at all. It really is only a parking area. I have been backing out of or pulling into my driveway directly across the street, which has significantly less visibility, has walls on either side of it. And I find backing out no issue whatsoever and have been doing it myself 35 years plus. And there's really plenty of visibility on either side, and there's significantly more on their side of the street for pulling out. Having front yard parking, as the city has said, they're trying to be strict on that, and this is not an appropriate spot for it. There is more than enough space if they'd like front yard parking closer to the house, and in fact, they've already created at least 2 parking spaces directly in front of the house now. And when I sat down for this meeting, there are multiple vehicles parked in those parking spaces that are non-conforming uses that are in place right now. There are multiple vehicles there. Those are not, those are front yard parking. And it makes it clear that there's plenty of space, even with all of the grading that they've done to the site, for them to put front yard parking closer to their house than to my house. If you take a look at the measurements, my front door is literally closer to this parking lot than their own front door. They have placed it all the way out at the sidewalk in such a way that it is as far from them as they can make it, and put it outside of this gate. The zoning code really doesn't take into account the concept of having, essentially a commercial gated structure in front of residential parking. I mean, in front of a residential driveway. I know that everyone's saying that the ordinance has room for interpretation, but I read it as clearly pertaining to pedestrian entrances, because it talks about trellis work and gateways along those lines. If you wanted to have a gate across your walk, it says a maximum of 10 by 10 feet for such a thing. This is bordering 30 plus feet wide with these walls and this gate. Even if it was just the gate by itself, it's well more than 10 feet wide. This is a significant structure in front of their house. There's no need for these walls. The walls themselves are 4 feet tall. And really, with the siting of the house above the street level, really all the walls do is they do more screening of and privacy from this parking lot, from the house, than they do any sort of privacy of the house from the rest of the sidewalk. There's plenty of visibility from the fencing, so there's no privacy afforded by this wall structure. And you can certainly cover or the gate structure with bushes and fencing. Additionally, that would mean that you don't need an entire extra almost 11-foot wide wall matching on the other side of the driveway. I know that the layout is showing only one parking space on either side of the driveway. The city has said that only one's necessary, but again, strict use of front yard parking, which they've already placed up near their house without asking for zoning variance for it, and are using on a daily basis, and should be more than sufficient between that and the portico drive that they have. They're leaving, this gate structure is 1,700 square feet. It is very large and leaves abundant space for really more like 4 parking spaces on either side of the driveway without obstructing the ability to drive in and out. Additionally, the concept of putting no parking signs in these spaces, nobody's going to tow the people that come to visit their own house, and nobody is here to be the zoning police for the neighborhood, and that's not a thing that the city's going to do. Having no parking signs out front isn't going to help the look or the actual character of the neighborhood in any way. The plans sort of also leave out the actual dimensions of the columns that they're adding. They've measured to the column itself at 6'4", I think it was. The capstone is another 3 inches. They've left out any dimensioning of the urns that are an integral part of those columns. They are stone or concrete. They're permanently attached, and they actually are plumbed into an irrigation system as well. And that will lead those columns to being 8 feet tall. And they are placed at least a couple of feet above the grade of the parking of the sidewalk, making it kind of imposing, frankly. The entire thing is beyond, there is nothing comparable anywhere on the street that looks like it, and it does not comport with the neighborhood. I I know that they've said there are several fences nearby, but I don't think they really counted them correctly. There is a 5-foot fence directly to their east, their neighbor. That's really comparable and would match well with a 5-foot fence on this property. The wood fence on the other side of their property is for a house that faces towards Taft Lane. And this could be seen more as their backyard or side yard. And it really isn't, it frankly should not have been approved at 6 feet tall when it was, but it has been there probably 40 plus years. On the other side of Taft Lane, there was a stone and now metal fence that was put in at 8 feet tall, which is what these columns would be. And the city, I believe it might have been you, had a variance meeting, and those were cut down to 4 feet. I think that these columns, if the columns themselves, and having watched that process, it's pretty easy to cut the columns down. The columns could be reduced to a 5 feet to match a 5-foot metal fence. Oh, also the metal fence over at 1858, that is also 5 feet. And those columns on the corners are 6 feet tall. So those are really the only fences that are anywhere near this size anywhere in the neighborhood. There's only the single 6-foot, essentially backyard fence. And that's a picket fence. I mean, picket, it's 100% opaque, but that's a thin fence that I don't think is a good comparison. So a 5-foot fence on this property, which is still a foot above the standard zoning, I think is reasonable. I think that would look fine. I think it would match up well with surrounding fences and gives them sufficient security for pets and everything above. The columns and wall system, I would like to point out, the staffing report does say that the process appears to have been, they asked for permits, they were denied. They went ahead and built the wall completely. And I can actually tell you that they finished building those walls and then applied for this variance at least 2+ days after those walls were completed. Between that and the stone paved parking spaces that are in use as we speak now, I find to be sort of and the documentation and the lack of the urns on top of the walls now are not a good faith effort to comport with this zoning process by an owner that is a very successful large real estate developer. And I feel that is snubbing this process is upsetting to me. I think that cutting down these columns to 5 feet, bringing with the cap to 6 feet, to 5 and change, that would match well with the 5-foot fences, then urns on top of that, which would take it to probably 6.5, 7 feet tall. That's reasonable. I think that is a reasonable accommodation. I think that the walls as they are, and that they have placed them without even knowing that they had been denied in the permit and did not follow through with the zoning variance is disturbing and should not be considered as, oh, it's already built, so it's existing. But it is reasonable to allow those walls to stay at 4 feet with columns that stop at 5 to match a 5-foot fence. The parking that they are asking for in this front yard, which is literally closer to my front door than it is to their own, is the staff report says, this is actually going to increase property values in the neighborhood, which I would strongly disagree with. That is not a thing. The idea that I would have no parking signs across the street from me in this lot, this is a service lot that they're asking for, with a commercial gating system. This is exactly the thing that the zoning ordinances are for preventing, is doing things like a front yard parking lot right up against the sidewalk. Additionally, these parking spaces would actually destroy that visibility angle, those triangles on either side of the driveway. Having these available for people to be parking in really harms their ability to see past cars parked there. That's a problem. I think a really good example of parking is at 1858 across the street from them. There are multiple parking spaces across the driveway from the house. They are up with the house and with the pool at that site. It is screened from the road. It is not objectionable. It doesn't block visibility of pedestrians on the sidewalk. I think they do a really nice job there of that fencing. Additionally, that's a 5-foot fence around the house. And in fact, they installed a 6-foot fence in their side and backyard for their pets to use. This site has an abundant amount of area. I think it's about 2 acres for fencing if they want a full 6-foot fence that they feel necessary. At the side yard, the rear yard does have more space in it. I believe that I've seen a play set. There's plenty of space back there for it. And really, the issue of how much space there is for that fence at the sides and rear of the house are all completely dependent on the conditions that they have set themselves by the sizing and placement of this house on this property. So to claim that they've gotten through this entire project and now the final step is, oh, now we're forced to have parking out here at the street when they've got parking that they've done without a zoning variance at the house itself, is disturbing. I would, as a compromise, ask that the fence be 5 feet tall, that these columns be reduced so that the overall height of the stonework is at 5 feet to match the fence, that with a stone cap above that and the urns above that. And I also feel that the fencing should be brought in. This design has an additional 8+ feet on either side, increasing that width to make them, frankly, functional parking spaces, which really are not necessary for safety and pulling out of the driveway. They should be placed directly on the north side of those outside columns and coming towards the sidewalk on the north side of the columns rather than on the east and west, extending them out wider. Frankly, having this opportunity for parking provided in this design with this fence is, I mean, we can all wink and nod that it's not paved, it's grass, or it's a surface that's not supposed to be parked on, but that's what will happen invariably if it's been left with this gateway structure in this way. I think that it should be reduced down from this 1,700 square foot parking lot to one that, if it's brought straight south, that still leaves 10'6" on either side, 10'8" on either side of the driveway, which leaves abundant visibility when pulling out of the driveway. It would still be better than what I've got in my own driveway. I think that's probably everything that I was thinking about here.
Sorry about that. I was muted there for a second.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Mr. Davis, for your
Thank you.
testimony. I appreciate it. I guess one question back, just real quickly, is it never occurred to me that someone would want a visitor to park all the way down the end of the driveway
It's a service lot.
instead of just pulling up and parking closer to the house. I mean, it didn't occur to me. I understand your points, but why would they want visitors to park all the way outside of the gate?
It's a service lot is what I see it as. I see it as, sure, it could be spillover parking for a party, but there's abundant parking on the street, and people have had large parties at all of the large houses in our neighborhood for decades and have plenty of parking directly on the street.
So you're saying like DoorDash delivery, the guy stops there and parks there while
park on the street or pull into the driveway. I mean, part of the problem here is that the zoning is simply not set up with the idea that you would gate off your driveway. That's sort of the foundational problem with all of this, is the idea that, oh, nobody can pull up the drive when they aren't. The zoning just, I get that people are saying that there's a question of the wording and the interpretation, but it really is not saying anything about a gate on a driveway. There is a gate across Taft Lane, but that is behind the house. That is a fully opaque gate, automated gate for the parking area. And I could absolutely see a gated space like this up closer to the house, on next to the driveway or next to the garage. But all of that is part of the design process that would have happened in the design and placement of the house and structures. There are literally dozens of loads of fill that were brought in on this site to regrade the entire hill. One of the things stated in the staffing report about why the walls won't and fence won't cause a valley effect is because there's a dip behind them. That dip was before they brought in, I don't know how many cubic yards of fill. There was a significant drop below the street level in that front yard that you can see in older views. The Google Street View of the old that Brenda Hoskins' yard had. That's gone. They graded the entire site as they saw fit and could have easily incorporated all of these things. They could have put a fence so that the driveway did not need to be behind a gate. The entire yard would be fenced off separately from this gate structure, and it would not be required at the street. They have set up these structures. They have set up all of these requirements themselves for why a gated security fence and service lots need to be placed at the street. And that is completely out of character. And frankly, the zoning code really doesn't even address it because it's so sort of foreign.
Well, the zoning code standards for variances do make it clear that the applicant or owner cannot create the condition that requires the variance.
Which is,
but Mr. Davis, just trying to be thoughtful with the other neighbors' time.
Of course.
Can I let them weigh in here real quick? And I'd be happy to let you finish your thoughts.
I appreciate it.
Do you want us to respond to each owner, or how would you like us to handle it?
I typically go through, Mr. Schimberg, I typically go through all the public comment and then allow for a response. I think it flows a little better. But I mean, if you have a strong opposition that you might, lose some thoughts, because I know Mr. Davis had a lot to offer. If you feel strongly about that, I could take some testimony now, but I'd like to give these folks an opportunity to provide testimony. And
I only have one quick thought, and it's really about the parking on the north of the gate, the turnaround areas. We have no interest. No one would park there. It is merely for friends or family or deliveries that would come to the gate and force them to back out onto William Howard Taft. It is just a turnaround. And the conjecture shown by the neighbor of substantially knowing exactly what our intent was is a little shocking, because I've never discussed it with him. And he has basically taken a design and now looks at it as a service drive, and it's our main entrance. We have ample parking, and this is merely if a gate does not open, that people have the opportunity to back out. If you don't want us to have the parking there, then we'll have a gate with no turnaround. And at the first accident, I will report it to the police and will reapply for the turnaround. The turnaround is simply a turnaround and to pull out onto a busy street. We moved the gate substantially off the sidewalk. It's almost a monument, a small monument in my own yard. And it is not out on the sidewalk. But if it's so offensive and he sees service trucks parking there, which just couldn't be more inaccurate, then I don't really care. I got a driveway. If the gate opens, they'll drive up and work on the yard or come to a party. If the gate doesn't open, they can back out onto the street. Backing out onto the street on the south side is substantially more dangerous than backing out of the street on the north side, because we have blind traffic coming over Taft Lane, and Taft Lane is one house away from us. So we are more comfortable pulling out onto Taft forward. And Chris must either have nerves of steel or phenomenal driving skills that he feels comfortable backing out onto Taft Lane backwards. That's fine. If you don't want the parking pad and you want to improve the gates and the fence without the parking pad, be my guest. We did it as a life safety issue only. It will never impact me or my family, because me and my family will go through the gate and up to our home. And so will our guests, and so will anyone working on the house. This is only if we are not home and someone is coming by and needs to now turn around and leave. It was my idea. And if nobody wants it and the city can't approve it, I will just wait for the first accident and take this variance, and we will just reapply at that time. No problem. I don't have any issue with that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schimberg, for that response. I'm gonna move now to Ms. Grant. Ms. Grant, what would you like to say?
Hi. So I do have just one or two questions and then a couple quick comments. So first, and my apologies to all, because we did get the notice so late. I received the documents from Cassandra, but I just wanted to confirm, how far will the fence, the requested 6 foot tall or however tall it ends up being fence, be from the sidewalk? I wasn't able to figure that out from the picture that Cassandra shared.
Kurt or Dan, could you answer that?
I can speak to that. The fence is designed at 6 foot off the sidewalk to allow a layer of plantings to be in front of the fence on the Taft side.
Okay. And then how far will the plantings, whatever they might be, go? Will they go all the way up to the sidewalk?
I would have to pull the final landscape plan. Dan, maybe you can speak to that.
Okay.
We are planting arborvitaes, which are tall and narrow, conical. They will not impede walking on sidewalks. That's it's a hot button of mine, because we both walk a lot in the city in the urban core. In fact, I talked to my neighbor who his are sticking out over the sidewalk currently.
Mhm.
I can, they typically get about 4.5 to 5 feet round.
Mhm.
They'll be tight to the fence, so they might grow through the fence a little bit. They will not come over the edge of the sidewalk.
Great. And those are thank you. My comments are specifically around being a pedestrian in this area. And my watch out, so a lot of questions about the fence and the nature of the neighborhood. So the house is beautiful. It was built on a lot that had 2 houses previously. Neither of those houses had a fence near the sidewalk. So this will change substantially the nature of walking in this neighborhood. As you mentioned, there are other homes that have walls and fences. This will become an entire block of fenced and walled area as a pedestrian that we will walk by now. So I would like, as a person who also walks in the neighborhood a lot, would appreciate like the consideration of maybe not as high of a fence, not as impactful of an experience walking by there, because it will now be an entire chock of fenced land where it was not previously.
That's why we set it back 6 feet.
Yeah. And my second comment, also around being a pedestrian in the neighborhood, is related to the turnaround spot. My worry is that it will actually encourage turnaround. And I say that living in a cul-de-sac off of Taft, where we get a large number of confused, angry drivers who turn around both very fast on the cul-de-sac, but also often pull in and back out in that cul-de-sac. So I would just kind of caution that by creating a turnaround spot, are we welcoming more cars to stop and turn around in an area where they might not be familiar? So that would be my watch out for a turnaround. It does impact mainly pedestrians because it will be, in addition to your guests who know what they're doing, it will be other confused, lost people who are not concerned with the pedestrians on the street, who are more concerned with their own confusion, anger. And just my last comment is, I do agree with the traffic on that street, but it has not substantially changed in the last 3 years. Since 2020, the traffic has been pretty standard. There was a change during the pandemic. It has not substantially increased unless there is an issue on Columbia Parkway. In that case, we do see higher traffic coming down Taft. But in general, the traffic patterns have been pretty standard over the last 3 years. But my main watch out is just really about the consideration of the character of the neighborhood, being a pedestrian and a neighbor in the neighborhood, less so than the design aspect or anything else. How does this impact the neighborhood, and can we make it a positive impact to the neighborhood?
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Grant, for your time and your testimony today, and providing that input on short notice. Thank you. I see that we have Mr. Hankey. Not sure if I'm saying that right. If you could unmute.
I'll call him back
Yes.
in a moment. Yeah, hi, this is Jerry Hinkey. I live directly across the street, 1880 William Howard Taft, the one with the white fence. And I'm here with my son, Chris, who grew up in the house. We lived there since 1970. And
Not me, but
Mary is a caretaker, and she's been involved with our family and family matters there forever. And she's very knowledgeable on a lot of things regarding animals. And that was one of the points that I guess was presented here today, was the concern for keeping, was it coyotes or something of that nature? I can't recall. What were all the animals that you were concerned about?
Well, there was a deer killed by coyotes in our front yard last year. There is a big coyote traffic that runs around, and to the extent that we can minimize it, you'll never mitigate it completely. But our attempt was not to have coyotes because they have a consistent habit of killing dogs. So we are trying to limit the coyote traffic in the yard.
So my question to you and to your builder is, have
So,
you consulted-
I'm sorry, just to interrupt here. So first thing, I think it does help with the flow and with the record if we have one person testifying at a time. So if you could sort of go one by one. Also, if it, I believe it was Mary and Stranky's son, if they both would like to testify, I'll need to swear both of them in.
we
I don't believe they were initially sworn. I could have been wrong. Do you
they
solemnly
were,
swear
but they
that
were
the
around the
testimony you shall
corner.
give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Amen.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question was to the builder, and first off, did you consult with the Department of Natural Resources or Fish and Wildlife with regard to fencing that is appropriate for a reduction in coyote presence?
No, we just worked with the homeowner.
Okay, so just some quick facts. A coyote only needs 3 to 4 inches of space to squeeze through a fence. He can jump 5 to 7 feet flat-footed if he has a rail to land on, which if I'm looking at this fence correctly, he would have that level platform. And so this fencing is not going to keep the coyote problem off of this property.
Plus going under.
And there's the additional issue of a dig guard, which would have to be anywhere from 4 to 8 inches below the ground to prevent them from actually digging under. So coyote usually don't kill deer. Deer are usually injured and die, and coyote eat them. They eat carrion. So if something dies on your property and you see a coyote eating it, unless you've actually seen him kill it, I would assume that something else killed the deer first. And secondly, the concern for keeping, I understand that the concern for the pets, that's definitely for sure a concern, but I would advise, if you're going to do that, the fence would have to be higher. You would have to have dig guard, and you would also have to narrow the space between the bars from, you said 4 inches? The space is 4 inches. You would have to narrow that to about 2 inches, which would affect the opacity of the fence line.
Just so everyone here understands, we moved a mile from here. We had a big coyote problem in our backyard. We installed this exact fence, lived there for 2 years, and we did not have a single coyote back in our yard. We had 2 coyotes chase our dog all the way back up to the backyard. So while coyotes have the capacity to jump, because I've seen them on Columbia Parkway leap an 8 or 9 foot wall, they also just kind of walk along. And we are comfortable, and I use the word mitigate, not abolish. So the fencing there is so multiple dogs can run around on the inside of our fenced yard and reduce the coyote interruptions. I am not trying to abolish coyotes from my yard. I'm just.
Well, that was not my
Thanks.
information,
So,
but I'm
I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna have to stop the crosstalk. We'll allow room for rebuttal and for response to all this. I think this is going to move a little bit smoother and quicker if we allow just one person at a time to provide testimony and then move on. So, Mary, if you have anything else you'd like to say,
I just would like to see that consult with DNR and the Fish and Wildlife with regard to the fencing being an appropriate fence to prevent that. I do understand the concern with pets. My suggestion would be to put a better fence with smaller holes and a dig guard if you want to really prevent that. Secondly is, I guess you're next. You can.
Yeah, let me, Ms. Grant, do you have a quick question?
Yes, I need to leave.
Sure.
So I just wanted to let you know and not just
Sure.
just hang up. Thank
I
you
appreciate
very
that.
much.
Thank you again. Thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you all.
Okay. Take care. I'll send you a copy of our decision.
Go
Ms. Grant.
ahead.
Okay, Mr. Hankey.
Yeah, so there's 2 of them here. Chris Hinkie and Jerry Hinkie. I'm the owner. And I'd just like to finish up. First of all, I support Chris Davis. He's just our neighbor to our left, looking across the street, pretty much with everything he said in terms of the concern for the size and the placement and the purpose as described. My son will address that a little bit when he has a moment here, but I also support Valerie's position about the character of the neighborhood. I know it's not, I guess, not officially a historic sanctioned neighborhood. So there's different rules for historic zoning, and you can do things, but we do appreciate consideration from the new homeowner to take that to strong consideration, and to what extent can this be the intent for a fence be kind of reduced in intensity, the whole parking situation. There's a story in the public library, it's Hamilton County, about 1880 Taft Road. That's the name of it. And if you look it up and read it, it talks an awful lot about the rolling hills and the open nature back in the 1880s, early 1900s. And I know we can't preserve, all of that forever. I understand that, but considering there is history on the community, the area, Harriet Beecher Stowe, her either grandniece or niece or niece lived in the house what I lived in, where I live right now, had the house moved back 100 feet with horse-drawn pulleys and cables and everything they did to pull it 100 foot off what was called Sherman Road. But I guess I tell you that because those facts are out there. And as much as, my interest is obviously to preserve and protect the community as much as possible, the way it looks with the openness and the rolling hills. And my opposition to fence is just for that reason. I would just like to preserve as much as we can the way it used to be. I think that's going to be important for future generations as well. I don't have much more other than, like I said, with everything Chris said and the details and the description and the purpose of the turnaround. That's about all I have. Is I'm completely opposed to it. And then my son would, and now I'm finished. He has some points.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, just I was not aware until now that it was actually refused for a permit, and then they built this anyway. So that doesn't give me much patience in terms of this situation. The character of someone that built something after being declined for it. That being said, I love things like automated fences and smart things, technology and all that, but this structure does seem like the design itself poses a hazard the way it was built. There is street side parking right next to that automated gate, and nothing wrong with someone parking on the street till that gate opens up. I see this as an issue that was created, not one that was necessarily an issue to begin with. An automated gate at street level with a reasonable fence. They can wait. Some people can wait on the side of the street till the gate opens up. I don't know why they have to pull in, and then they have to then create parking space to turn around at, so that way they can keep that automated gate with that spacing like that. It doesn't make sense to me. It could either be closer to the house or it could be closer to the street. Either way, there's other ways to create a safe method other than keeping it at this exact distance. This just seems like a man-made problem that was created after the fact rather than a problem that was there to begin with. I don't see it as an issue that should impact neighbors. That's all.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for your testimony. It is Chris Hankey, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that was that Mary Hankey?
Mary Johnson.
Okay. Got it. All right. Thank you too very much for your time, your testimony here today. Appreciate it. Okay. This is typically where I'll give the zoning plans examiner, Wes Menzel, an opportunity to review his staff report, and if he would like to add testimony to that. But Wes, before you do that, I think I'm going to offer something to the applicant and the owners here. Mr. Davis mentioned earlier that there was a similar sort of stone concrete structure that was 8 feet that came in front of me. And, I will to some degree look at that as some precedent, but what happened in that hearing was similar to this. There were some neighbors that either didn't have all of the information or got the information late or had some concerns. And what we did was we briefly continued the hearing or the application for 2 weeks to allow for greater discussion, to allow for the owner to hear and potentially incorporate, or to just greater, better understand what some of the neighbor concerns were, and see if there were any alterations to the design that could alleviate some of those concerns, and potentially find something that was more agreeable. Of course, that is a decision that the owners, it is theirs and theirs alone, whether they want to try to engage in that sort of dialogue and that conversation, or if they would like me to, again, take all the evidence that I have here in front of me today and make a decision based off of that. So before we went any further, after hearing from the public, I thought that was something that I would at least offer to the owners if they would like to take me up on that. Sure. Go ahead, Dan.
I'm very familiar with that situation. That was on the west side of Taft Lane. And the objections there were the owners of Taft, people who owned homes on Taft Lane, when they would come down, the columns that were constructed in his side yard blocked. It was a life safety issue, blocking, so they could not see pedestrians and could not see cars coming down around the blind corner and turning on from Collins. The location of this gate structure is it 40 feet up from the sidewalk, Kurt?
Yeah, so it actually sits outside the front yard setback requirement of 35 feet. And it sits back, I'm sorry, the front yard setback is 30 foot. The front of the structure is 34.5 feet back from the face of the sidewalk. So it's technically out of the front yard setback.
So
I offered that less is precedent. I mean, I am going to look at it, and I know that there's certainly some differences. I think you're right here. That was more about how the process could unfold if you wanted to, to try that. That's it. And again, I take in public comment, I consider everything, but ultimately I just need to look at this and look at the standards and see if it works based on the evidence I have. So I'm not suggesting that's going to necessarily influence. Well, I think when there is more agreement, it does obviously help me approve these. And in that particular case, they went and they talked and they came to some agreement, and it actually helped move the project forward. But again, I think you understand how the process works, and just wanted to make sure that you're aware that that was an option if you wanted it.
thank you. So our position is simply the gates are outside the front yard setback. The parking, there's someone shaking their head like he knows the rules differently than I do. I'm not quite sure what.
Well, I mean, there's no setback for a gate. That's not a thing.
There is front yard setbacks. So if I can finish now, since I didn't interrupt you, the gate is outside the front yard constructible fence setback. And I am happy to delete the parking because we put it there as a life safety issue that will not impact my friends, my family, Amazon, anyone who would be pulling up. We never, ever, ever intended it to be used for parties, service, drop off, anything. So in your decision, we would not object to the approval of everything without the parking, which seemed to be of major concern. the fencing, we would like to keep. It matches the neighbor, and it's going to be removed from the sidewalk to allow it not impeding or impacting the sidewalk and the residential ability of it. So I would like to keep the entire application in place except for the front yard parking variance.
Okay.
Kurt, do you have any additional information?
I just wanted to add a couple facts, clarification facts from Chris's testimony, if that's acceptable. But,
Yeah, sure. This is your opportunity to respond to anything the public has said. Although I realize now that would you like to hear Wes's summation before you officially respond and rebut to everything?
Sure.
Yeah. What, Wes? Anything?
I guess I just need to clarify that I guess I missed the column height and urn height on the review. So I think we might want to just add that to the request for the height to be, the column is 6'7" tall, I think, after looking at the plan more closely. Plus the urn height, which I think is about a foot. I'm not sure exactly.
The urn is not mechanically fastened. It's a flower pot that just sits on top of that flat shelf.
Okay.
It is not mechanically fastened in any way.
I guess I'm not totally sure that that would count against the height, but we could assume that it does for the sake of the discussion today. But I would just suggest that we should account for the two column heights in the variance review for the height, first part of the request. And then I would just add a couple of things about, although if the applicant's withdrawing the front yard parking, this wouldn't be relevant, but just the evidence about needing 2 versus 1, or evidence if even Amazon or FedEx would actually use the turnaround. From what I've seen in my experience around town, is like on Beachmont Avenue near where I live, they just stop like on the right hand side of the road next to the curb and jump out, and they're there for 20 seconds. I don't even think they would actually use the turnaround, which I think maybe Mr. Davis might have mentioned, but just adding that kind of comment. But I don't have any problems with them removing the front yard parking element of the request. But we would still support the 6-foot fence height, or a little slightly higher column height. I think that's compatible with the neighborhood and wouldn't necessarily be a detriment to anybody. The neighboring fences that I saw along Taft are, I think, 5 foot tall, the two decorative ones, and the privacy fence is 6 foot tall, which I think I put pictures in my report of those. And then I do note that the columns at 1858 Taft, I guess those are maybe 6 to 7 feet tall. So I would say that the proposal for the fencing and columns would be, appropriate for the neighborhood, but maybe the front yard parking is not. So thanks.
Thanks, Wes. Okay, Kurt. Floor is yours.
If the parking's out, then that's my comments were just to be clear on it that there was no intention for parking, and it's very clear in that when you look at the plans, because we only allowed 15 feet, and a typical parking spot is 18 foot deep. So no permanent car could sit there and still have access to the driveway. So for that purpose, I just wanted to clarify that, along with, there was comment of this was a 1,700 square foot parking pad. It's actually only 225 square feet on each side of the entrance for the turnaround, which is more in line with about 450 square feet. So I just wanted to get those two things on record.
Gotcha. So if the proposal for the parking, just I'll just refer to it as a parking pad, even though I know that there's some disagreement there. If the proposal would be to remove that, the design would design change to put the gate and the stone structures on either side down further towards the street?
No, they would stay as planned to leave enough room for a car to pull off of William Howard Taft and have a place to sit instead of being half on Taft and half in the driveway.
So would the fence, because I'm just trying to envision how exactly the site plan changes. Do you have any drawings, Kurt, that you could just share quickly?
Essentially, the fence would come parallel to William Howard Taft, and then it would turn south towards the river, towards our home, and go back, and then turn again into the gate wall. And that provides this kind of 35-foot area for landscaping and to soften the entrance on each side of the driveway. So the gate, the fencing does not go up to the driveway. The fencing would stop 15 feet short of the driveway on each side and turn at a right angle up into our yard, clear the front yard setback, and then tie into the structure.
Got
So
it. Okay.
That
makes
page
sense.
5 of Wes's
Yeah.
report has a detail of how it would look, minus the hatched areas that we're representing for car turnaround.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. All right. So, based on the fact that I'm going to be strict here on time, 2 minutes. Mr. Davis or Mr. Hankey, if you'd like to respond to the suggested alteration. Floor is yours, Mr. Davis.
Sure. I'll make it quick. The reference to the 1,700 square feet is that the pavement is short of that, but they leave the dimensions off of its width. The current design for that fence extends another 8 feet wide past the edges of the wall right now. So if that fence is instead brought straight north off those outside columns on that design, straight out towards the street, that provides still almost 11 feet in between the driveway and that fence area to soften that design. It doesn't need a full, if it's a 13-foot wide driveway, right now that space is 50 feet wide total. So that's 37 feet. So more than 18 feet on each side of the driveway. That's simply not necessary to be that large. Bringing that in tighter will make it less likely to be a turnaround space and would work far better. That is probably the one thing that I would say should be done. If there's no parking, then it does not need that large setback in that space. It's clear that with the fencing, even with the visibility in the fencing, the thing that's left out of ordinances like this is visibility because of landscaping. And that is sort of can't do anything about. They're going to put in enough trees to make it just as opaque. That's not a thing to be addressed, so be it. But I think that's the thing. The 1,700 feet is the 50-foot by 34-foot space that they're leaving there now.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Again, thank you for your time, your testimony here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
To the folks in the Hankey house, 2 minutes, if at all.
All right, go ahead, Chris. I want you to explain this.
Mine again is just that the safety factor is an issue that was created by the structure. It doesn't necessarily need to be there. There is street side parking right there on that side of the road, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So they could bring that automated fence out so no one could get trapped. No one could have an obstruction of view because of the fence that is being built, and wait for the gate to open and then pull right on in. You would not be waiting in a place where traffic would be held up. You'd be waiting in a place that is already designated for parking as it is. I think this structure is creating the safety factor in itself. So it just looks like a very poor design right here. And I agree with Chris Davis that this doesn't seem very good in general. That's all I have to say on the matter.
So I get the second minute. Real quick. So yeah, in the fact that this was constructed without the permit or denied, and I just think moving it forward to this closer to the street to be in line with the fence, if a fence is there that works for the neighborhood, that's okay. But ever since the beginning of this whole revealing of information, I still don't even know what the fence looks like. I know that we've been talking about opacity and things, but is there a artist rendition? Is there, is it staggered? Is it, you talked about it being off the front sidewalk back into the property. I don't know if it's wood, metal. I guess maybe that's in the report somewhere. I just got this notice leaked to myself. It went to the wrong address. So, but that's, my points are supporting Chris Davis, Chris Hinkie. Maybe take it down and move it forward, or not have it at all, and don't create a problem that wasn't there and doesn't need to be there. You can park right on Taft. It's already approved.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Hankey. And to both Chris and to Jerry and Mary, thank you for your time, your testimony here today. I have a 1:30 hearing, which means Kurt and Dan have 5 minutes, then we will adjourn. Floor is yours.
My final comments are, we are extensive builders all over the city, residential and commercial builders, Department of Traffic Engineering and Transportation on almost every single occasion requires that any gate or entrance or anything is set substantially back, 25 to 35 feet back, in case there are large trucks or fire or anyone wants to stage at the bottom of the driveway at the entrance so that they're not blocking the road. This is kind of historical precedence. We thought because the front yard setback's at 30 feet, bringing it back in would provide some relief, make transportation happy. To the woman's comment who lives on Heather Hill, this also provides substantial relief from the entire frontage for her, and what she was talking about of not having a sidewalk lined with fencing and trees. This provides a large kind of 35 to 40 foot area where there's some relief at the sidewalk in terms of her walking. I think we've made a significant compromise by eliminating the parking turnaround area at the bottom of the driveway. And I ask that this council and this review be approved as presented without and deleting the auxiliary parking that was there for turnaround.
Okay. Anything from Mr. Zobrist?
No, I second the homeowner's request.
Okay. All right. I think we'll leave it at that. Again, thanks to everyone for your thorough discussion here. I appreciate it. I have some reviewing to do. As I look at some of the street views and stuff on the computer, I just get the sense that those aren't completely up to date. So I think this would be an instance where it would be helpful for me to at least do a drive-by to sort of better understand the surrounding area, the traffic, and the conditions on the property. And so I'm gonna take advantage of that and do that this time. I said in the beginning, these typically take about 2 weeks. I think that's about right. So if you'll bear with me, I'm gonna take a look at the application, the code, and the property, and make a determination. Once I do that, I put it in writing, and I send a copy of that decision to everybody who's in the hearing here today. And so you all really have that decision just moments after it's complete. If you have any questions about the process or want a status update on the decision, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to answer any of those questions. I can't at this point, now that the hearing is concluded, I can't take in any new evidence or any new arguments. So I'd ask that you not send any of those to me. But if you have any questions about process or anything like that, I'm happy to answer questions. And I'm sure that Wes, if you have any questions for him, would also be happy to answer those while you're waiting for the decision, or even after the decision comes out. All right. I think we'll leave it at that. Thanks again, guys. Hope you all have a wonderful day.